The shy waitress shielded a mute child from an abusive manager and lost her job for it. What she didn't realize, the girl's father was a mafia kingpin who never left a debt unpaid. 24 hours later he appeared at her door with an offer that would change 3 lives forever. The Friday dinner service at Aurelia descended like a symphony of controlled chaos at exactly 6 o'clock. Iris Bellamy arranged silverware on table 12 for the 4th time that hour, her hands steady despite the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. The dining room glowed with amber light from crystal chandeliers, casting shadows across faces that held the kind of power that came from old bloodlines and new empires. Conversations floated past her in hushed tones, deals worth fortunes sealed over wine that cost more than her monthly rent. She'd been working at Aurelia for 18 months, ever since her linguistics degree had collected dust alongside rejection letters from companies that wanted experience she couldn't afford to get. The bitter irony kept her up some nights. She could decode 5 languages and analyze communication patterns that others missed, but she couldn't afford therapy for the social anxiety that made her voice disappear in crowds. That's when she noticed the girl. She couldn't have been older than 11, sitting alone at the corner table with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Dark hair pulled back in a velvet ribbon, a navy dress that whispered money, and eyes that seemed to carry 1,000 unspoken words. The child stared at the empty chair across from her with an intensity that made Iris's protective instincts flare. "Hi there," Iris said softly, approaching with a gentle smile. "Are you waiting for someone?" The girl's eyes met hers, filled with something ancient and sad, but her lips didn't move. Just a small nod. "Would you like some warm milk while you wait?" Another nod. Still no words. Just those dark, drowning eyes. Iris had just set down the glass when she heard the sharp crack of footsteps on marble. Sterling Hayes, the general manager, was cutting through the dining room with the expression of a man who'd found a problem that needed eliminating. "Excuse me," Sterling announced, his voice slicing through nearby conversations. "This table is reserved for actual paying guests." The girl's entire body went rigid, and Iris felt something hot and fierce ignite in her chest. "She's clearly waiting for her parent," Iris said, keeping her voice level despite her racing heart. "She's not bothering anyone." Sterling's face flushed red. He'd been brought in from corporate 3 months ago with a mandate to elevate standards, which apparently meant eliminating anything he deemed beneath Aurelia's image. "I don't recall asking for your input, Bellamy." He turned to the girl, his voice sharp. "You need to leave. Now." The girl's chin began to tremble, and Iris saw her trying desperately to make sounds that wouldn't come. "She's a child," Iris said, and for the first time in her life, she stepped between authority and her fear. "Not a problem to be solved. There's every reason to." "Or what?" The voice came from behind them, quiet and cold as winter steel. The entire dining room went silent. Not the natural pause of conversation, but the sudden, absolute silence that comes when every person in a room senses a predator has just entered. Iris turned. The man standing 10 feet away looked like danger dressed in a $3,000 suit. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes the same haunting brown as the girl's, he assessed the scene with the precision of someone who missed nothing and forgave less. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance like sentries. "Mr. Moretti," Sterling stammered, and Iris watched all authority drain from his face. "I didn't realize." "Clearly." Vito the Shadow Moretti walked forward with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything. He moved past Iris without acknowledgement and placed one hand on the girl's shoulder. "She's with me." The girl, Celeste, Iris would learn later, looked up at her father with those same desperate eyes. But she didn't smile. She didn't reach for him. Instead, she did something that made the entire room hold its breath. She slid from her chair, walked past her father and pressed herself against Iris's side. Her small hand clutched Iris's apron like a lifeline. Vito Moretti looked at his daughter choosing a stranger over him, and Iris saw something crack behind his carefully controlled expression. Not anger. Something far more painful. "Celeste," he said softly. "Come here." The girl didn't move. "It's okay," Iris whispered, gently touching Celeste's shoulder. "You should go to your dad." Celeste looked up at her with eyes that held years of silence and grief, then slowly released her grip and returned to her father. But she kept glancing back. Vito noticed. He noticed everything. "Sterling," Vito said, his voice carrying the weight of consequences. "You're going to apologize to my daughter." "Sir." "Of course, sir. I'm so sorry, miss. I didn't mean to frighten." "And to her." Sterling blinked. "Sir." The waitress. "Apologize to her as well." Iris felt every eye in Aurelia turn toward her, but the only gaze that mattered was the one belonging to the man they called the Shadow, a man who just made her visible in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The evening stretched ahead of Iris like a tightrope she had to walk without falling. Table 3 needed their check, Table 7 was waiting on dessert menus, and Table 9 had sent back their wine twice because the temperature wasn't quite right. She moved through the dining room with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned early that being overlooked was safer than being noticed. But she couldn't stop noticing the girl at Table 12. Celeste, though Iris didn't know her name yet, sat with a stillness that seemed unnatural for a child. Most kids fidgeted, kicked their legs under the table or played with their phones. This girl simply sat, hands folded in her lap, staring at the flickering candle centerpiece like it held answers to questions she couldn't ask. Iris delivered the wine to Table 9, accepted their grudging approval, and found herself drifting back toward Table 12. The girl hadn't touched the warm milk. The glass sat exactly where Iris had placed it, condensation forming delicate patterns on the crystal. "Is everything okay with the milk?" Iris asked softly, crouching slightly so she was at eye level. "I can get you something else if you'd like. Hot chocolate. Apple juice." The girl's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Iris saw something that made her chest ache. Recognition maybe. Or relief. Like someone drowning who just spotted a life raft. Celeste pointed to the milk, then to her throat, then shook her head. The gestures were small, almost apologetic, but Iris understood immediately. Too hot still. She was waiting for it to cool. "Smart," Iris said, and was rewarded with the smallest quirk of lips that might have been the beginning of a smile. "I always burn my tongue when I'm impatient." She started to stand, but the girl's hand shot out, fingers brushing Iris's wrist. Not grabbing, just touching. A connection. Then the hand withdrew, and the girl returned to her careful stillness. Iris's linguistics training kicked in, the part of her brain that had once analyzed communication patterns and nonverbal cues for academic papers that no one read. This child wasn't just quiet. She was silent in a way that felt intentional or perhaps involuntary. The distinction mattered. Throughout the next hour, Iris found herself creating excuses to pass by Table 12. Refilling water that was still half full. Adjusting the candle that didn't need adjusting. Asking if she needed anything, knowing the answer would be a shake of the head. But Celeste's eyes followed her. Every time Iris moved through the dining room, she felt that gaze tracking her like a compass needle finding north. It wasn't creepy or uncomfortable. It was something else entirely. Something that felt like hope or trust, or maybe just the desperate recognition of one lonely soul spotting another. The dinner rush built to its crescendo around 7:30. The restaurant hummed with energy. Laughter from Table 5, intense negotiations at Table 8, a marriage proposal at Table 15 that earned scattered applause. Aurelia was performing exactly as it should, a stage for the wealthy and powerful to play out their dramas. And through it all, the girl at Table 12 sat alone, waiting. Iris delivered entrees, cleared plates, smiled at customers who looked through her like she was part of the furniture. But piece of her attention remained tethered to that corner table, to the child in the navy dress who hadn't moved, who hadn't spoken, who watched Iris with eyes that seemed to be memorizing her face. At 8 o'clock, Iris brought her a small plate of butter cookies, the kind they usually reserved for VIP guests. She didn't ask permission from Sterling. He simply did it. Celeste looked at the cookies, then up at Iris, and this time there was no mistaking it. A smile. Small and fragile but real. "You don't have to eat them if you don't want to," Iris said. "I just thought you might be getting hungry. Waiting is hard." The girl nodded, selected one cookie with careful deliberation and took a small bite. Then she did something that made Iris's heart clench. She held out the plate, offering one to Iris. It was such a simple gesture. Such a human gesture. And Iris, who'd spent 18 months being invisible, being overlooked, being talked past and talked over, felt suddenly desperately seen. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a cookie. "That's very kind of you." They sat there for a moment, waitress and child, sharing butter cookies in the corner of an upscale restaurant while the world moved around them. And in that moment Iris didn't feel anxious. She didn't feel invisible. He felt like she mattered. She had no idea that across the dining room, a man in a charcoal suit had just walked in and was watching this entire exchange with eyes that missed nothing. Or that in less than an hour her life would change forever. All she knew was that this silent girl needed someone to see her. And for reasons Iris couldn't explain, she desperately needed to be that someone. It happened so fast that Iris almost missed it. One moment, Celeste was reaching for her water glass with the careful concentration of someone who'd learned to move through the world without making a sound. The next, her sleeve caught the edge of the bread plate, and the glass tipped, sending water cascading across the white tablecloth in a spreading pool that dripped onto the marble floor. The girl froze, her face draining of all color. Her mouth opened, shaped around words that wouldn't come, and her hands flew up in a gesture that looked like an apology, a plea and pure terror all at once. Iris was already moving, napkins in hand, but Sterling materialized faster. He crossed the dining room in 5 sharp strides. His face flushed the particular shade of red that came from someone who'd been waiting for an excuse to explode. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice cut through the ambient music and polite conversation like a blade. Several nearby tables went quiet, heads turning. Celeste shrank back in her chair, shaking her head frantically, her hands moving in desperate, wordless explanation. But no sound came. Not a whisper, not a cry, nothing. "This tablecloth costs more than..." Sterling grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet with enough force that the chair scraped backward with a harsh screech. "Do you have any idea what kind of establishment this is? We don't tolerate..." "Let her go." The words came from Iris's mouth before her brain could authorize them. Before fear could stop her. Before the familiar anxiety could paralyze her vocal cords the way it usually did when confronted with authority. Sterling's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me. Let her go." Iris stepped forward, placing herself between Sterling and the girl, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. "She's a child. It was an accident. This is none of your concern, Bellamy." Sterling's grip on Celeste's arm tightened, and Iris saw the girl's face contort in pain. "Get back to your tables before..." "Before what?" The voice came from behind Iris, quiet and laced with something that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Iris turned and found herself looking at a man who seemed to absorb all the light in the room. He sat at booth 7, partially hidden in shadow, but his presence was unmistakable. Tall, dark-haired, with a face that was handsome in the way that predators are beautiful. All sharp lines and controlled power. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, and his eyes, the same dark brown as Celeste's, fixed on Sterling with an intensity that made Iris's survival instinct scream. 2 men flanked the booth entrance, standing with the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in check. "Mr. Moretti." Sterling's voice climbed an octave, and his hand released Celeste's arm like it had burned him. "I didn't see you come in. I was just manhandling a child." Vito The Shadow Moretti stood in one fluid motion, and Iris understood in that instant why they called him the Shadow. He moved like darkness itself, silent and inevitable. "My child." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the kitchen noise seemed muted, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Sterling backed away, hands raised. "Sir, I apologize. I didn't realize she was with you. If I'd known." "You'd have what?" "Treated her with basic human decency." Vito's voice never rose above a conversational tone, but somehow that made it more terrifying. "That's not supposed to be conditional." Iris felt a small hand slip into hers. She looked down to find Celeste pressed against her side, fingers gripping hers with surprising strength. The girl's other hand clutched Iris's apron, and she was shaking, fine tremors that ran through her entire small frame. Vito's eyes tracked the movement, and Iris saw something flicker across his face. Surprise. Pain. Something deeper that looked almost like grief. "Celeste," he said softly, and the hardness in his voice fractured, revealing something almost gentle underneath. "Come here, sweetheart." But Celeste didn't move. If anything, she pressed closer to Iris, her face buried against Iris's side, her silent sobs shaking them both. Iris stood frozen, acutely aware that she was caught between a terrified child and a man whose reputation she was only beginning to understand. Her hand moved instinctively, settling on Celeste's shoulder in what she hoped was a comforting gesture. "It's okay," she whispered, though she had no idea if that was true. "You're safe." Vito Moretti watched his daughter choose a stranger's protection over his, and Iris saw something in his expression that looked like a man being cut open. He took a breath, straightened his shoulders, and when he looked at Iris, she felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. "You," he said. "What's your name?" "Iris Bellamy, sir." "Iris." He said it like he was committing it to memory. "Thank you for protecting my daughter." Then he turned to Sterling, and the temperature dropped again. "You and I need to have a conversation. In private." Sterling went pale. "Of course, Mr. Moretti. Of course." But Vito's eyes returned to Celeste, still clinging to Iris like a lifeline, and Iris realized she'd just stepped into something far bigger than a spilled glass of water. She'd stepped into the life of Vito the Shadow Moretti. And there was no stepping back. The summons came 20 minutes after Vito Moretti left with Celeste. A hostess appeared at Iris's side, her expression carefully neutral. "Sterling wants to see you in his office. Now." Iris's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, had felt it in the weighted silence that followed the confrontation, in the way the other servers had started avoiding eye contact. Still, knowing didn't make the walk to Sterling's office any easier. The hallway leading to the administrative wing felt longer than it should have. Each step echoed on the polished floor, a countdown to something inevitable. Sterling sat behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. Next to him stood a woman Iris recognized as Patricia Valdez, the regional owner's representative, elegant, silver-haired, and wearing an expression of professional disappointment. "Sit down, Ms. Bellamy," Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from them. Iris sat, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Sterling spoke first, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "What you did out there was completely unacceptable. You physically interfered with my management of a situation, contradicted me in front of guests, and caused a scene that could have damaged this restaurant's reputation." "I was protecting a child," Iris said quietly. She was scared. "You were hurting her. You assaulted a manager in the execution of his duties," Sterling snapped. "You created a hostile work environment and demonstrated a complete lack of respect for authority." Patricia held up a hand, silencing him. When she spoke, her voice was measured, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. "Miss Bellamy, I understand you thought you were doing the right thing. But you've been with us long enough to know that we have protocols. Sterling was addressing a situation, and you undermined him publicly." "The situation was a frightened 11-year-old girl who spilled water," Iris said, and heard her voice crack. "That's not a situation that requires grabbing a child. That's not your determination to make." Patricia pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the desk. Effective immediately, your employment at Aurelia is terminated. You'll receive 2 weeks' pay in lieu of notice, and your final paycheck will be direct deposited within 5 business days. The words hit Iris like a physical blow. Terminated. 5 business days. 2 weeks' pay that wouldn't even cover 1 month's rent. You're firing me for protecting a child from being manhandled? The panic was starting to claw its way up her throat now, making it hard to breathe. That's why I'm losing my job. You're being terminated for insubordination and assault, Sterling said, and Iris could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Clear out your locker and leave your uniform in the staff room. Security will escort you out. Iris stood on legs that felt like water. She wanted to argue, to fight, to do something other than accept this, but she could already feel the walls closing in. The anxiety that lived in her chest was spreading, making her hands numb, her vision tunnel. She'd been fired. She had maybe $300 in her checking account. Her student loan payment was due in 2 weeks. Rent was due in 12 days. She walked to her locker in a daze, her mind cycling through impossible math. Food or electricity? Rent or loan payment? Which bill could she delay without destroying what was left of her credit? The staff room was empty. Everyone was still working the dinner service that she was no longer part of. She pulled her jacket from her locker, her phone, the emergency granola bars she kept for shifts when she forgot to eat. Everything fit in her backpack. 18 months of work reduced to a bag she could carry in one hand. Security didn't actually escort her out. She walked herself through the back entrance, out into the cooling evening air that smelled like rain and exhaust fumes. That's when she saw the car. A black Mercedes S-Class sat at the curb, windows tinted dark, engine running. Iris would have walked right past it if the rear window hadn't lowered 6 inches. Inside, partially visible in the dim interior light, Vito Moretti sat with Celeste beside him. The girl's eyes locked onto Iris immediately, wide and searching, and then she did something that made Vito's entire body go still. Celeste pointed. Not at the window or the street or anything else. At Iris. Then with deliberate intention she reached over and touched her father's hand. Not a grab, not a pull. A gentle touch on his wrist followed by another point at Iris. Her meaning was unmistakable. Her. I want her. Don't let her go. Through the window Iris saw Vito look at his daughter, then at the hand touching his. The first voluntary touch Celeste had initiated with him in what looked like a very long time, and then at Iris standing on the sidewalk with her life falling apart. His expression was unreadable. But he pulled out his phone and made a call, his eyes never leaving Iris's face. And Iris, jobless and terrified and completely uncertain of what came next, couldn't look away. Iris spent the night staring at her ceiling, running the same impossible calculations over and over. Rent was $1,200. Utilities $150. Student loans $400. Phone, groceries, Metro card. The numbers blurred together into an equation with no solution. At 3 in the morning she'd pulled up job search sites on her phone, scrolling through listings that required experience she didn't have or paid minimum wage that wouldn't cover a fraction of her expenses. The panic sat in her chest like a living thing, making it hard to breathe. She must have finally fallen asleep around dawn, because the knock on her door jolted her awake at 8:30. She stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and peered through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that looked more expensive than her entire apartment. He held a cream-colored envelope in one hand and had the patient, alert stance of someone who'd spent time in the military or private security. Iris opened the door with the chain still attached. "Can I help you? Iris Bellamy?" His voice was polite but professional. "I have a delivery for you. From Mr. Moretti." Her heart kicked against her ribs. I'm not. He asked me to wait for your response." The man held up the envelope so she could see her name written across it in dark, precise handwriting. "Pay I." She shouldn't accept it. Every instinct screamed that accepting anything from Vito Moretti was dangerous, reckless, the kind of decision that changed trajectories. But her gaze caught on the stack of unpaid bills on her counter, and her hand was already reaching for the envelope. She closed the door, slid off the chain and opened it again. The driver handed her the envelope with something that might have been a slight bow. "I'll be in the car downstairs," he said. "Take your time." Iris closed the door and stared at the envelope. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The kind of paper that whispered money and power. She turned it over, broke the wax seal, actual wax, deep red, and pulled out the contents. 2 pages. The first was a letter, handwritten in the same precise script as her name. "Miss Bellamy. My daughter hasn't reached for another person in 7 years. She hasn't initiated physical contact with anyone, including me, since the night her mother died. Last night she touched my hand because she wanted me to follow you. She wanted me to make sure you were safe. You did something yesterday that no one in my world would ever do. You protected someone weaker than yourself without calculating the cost. That kind of integrity is rare. That kind of courage is rarer still. I'm told you lost your position at Aurelia. I'm also told you have a degree in linguistics and experience in communication analysis. My daughter needs both. Someone who can help her find her voice again and someone she already trusts. The second page is a formal offer of employment. I hope you'll consider it. Moretti." Iris's hands shook as she turned to the second page. It was a contract, printed on letterhead from Moretti Enterprises, LLC. She scanned the text, certain there had to be a mistake, but the numbers didn't change no matter how many times she read them. Position: private companion and speech therapist for Celeste Moretti. Compensation: $15,000 per month. Benefits: full health insurance, housing, meals. Duration: renewable 6-month contract. Condition: live-in position at the Moretti estate. Start date: immediate. $15,000 per month. More than she'd made in 6 months at Aurelia. Her phone buzzed. A text from her former coworker Maya. "OMG, have you seen this?" A link followed. Iris clicked it and felt the room tilt. The video had 17 million views. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation at Aurelia. Sterling grabbing Celeste, Iris stepping between them, Vito's quiet devastation when his daughter chose a stranger over him. The comments were endless. #Justice for Iris was trending. People were calling her a hero, demanding Aurelia fire Sterling, praising her courage. Her anxiety spiked. 17 million people. 17 million strangers who now knew her face, her name, her voice. The attention pressed down on her like a physical weight. Another text from Maya. "Sterling got suspended. Corporate is doing damage control. You're everywhere." Iris looked at the contract again. At the number that would solve every immediate problem. At the condition that would take her away from the viral attention, from the city that suddenly felt too small and too exposed. She thought about Celeste's hand in hers. The trust in those dark, desperate eyes. The way the girl had pointed at her like she was something worth saving. The driver was waiting. Vito Moretti was waiting. An answer was required. Iris picked up her phone and called the number printed at the bottom of the contract. Vito answered on the first ring. "Miss Bellamy. When do I start?" The Moretti estate sat 30 minutes outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and old-growth trees that blocked it from the road. The driver, whose name was Marcus, not to be confused with the other Marcus who'd gotten her fired, drove through security checkpoints that felt more like military installations than residential property. Cameras tracked their progress. Men in dark suits spoke into earpieces as they passed. Iris gripped her backpack in her lap, the only possession she'd brought with her, and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. The house itself was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. All clean lines and controlled power. 3 stories of stone and glass, wings spreading out from a central structure like something built to withstand siege. Gardens stretched in manicured precision, and a fountain carved from black marble dominated the circular drive. A fortress disguised as a mansion. Vito waited at the entrance, Celeste standing slightly behind him. He traded his suit jacket for shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, but somehow that made him more intimidating, not less. Without the armor of formal dress, she could see the strength in his forearms, the economical way he moved. "Miss Bellamy." He extended his hand and Iris shook it, surprised by the warmth of his grip. "Thank you for coming." "Iris," she said. "Please." Celeste peered around her father's side, and when their eyes met, the girl's entire face transformed. Relief. Recognition. Something that looked almost like joy. Vito noticed. He always noticed. "Come inside. We should talk before you settle in." He led her through rooms that felt more like museum galleries than living spaces. High ceilings, expensive art, furniture that was beautiful but somehow cold. They ended in a study lined with books, a massive desk dominating one corner, and windows that overlooked the grounds. "Sit," Vito said, gesturing to a leather chair. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter without asking if she wanted any, and handed her one. "I believe in being direct, so I'll skip the pleasantries. I hired you because my daughter needs you, and because you did something yesterday that no one in my world would ever do." "Protect a child?" Iris kept her voice steady despite the way her pulse hammered. "Protect someone weaker without calculating the cost." He sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Everyone in my life operates on transactions. Debts and favors. Power and leverage. You saw a scared little girl and stepped between her and danger without thinking about consequences. That's not stupidity. That's integrity. And integrity is the rarest commodity I've ever encountered." Iris thought about the viral video, the lost job, the apartment she'd have to give up. "The consequences found me anyway." They did. No apology in his voice. Just acknowledgement. "Which is why you're here. I settle my debts, Iris. Always. And I owe you for what you did for Celeste." He stood, walked to the window, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that felt like confession. "My daughter hasn't spoken in 7 years. Not since the night she watched her mother die." The words hung in the air like smoke. Iris felt them settle into her understanding of the silent girl who'd clutched her apron. "Murdered," Vito continued, still facing the window. "By people who wanted to hurt me. Celeste was hiding in a closet. She saw everything. And since that night she hasn't said a single word." Iris's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." "She's been to specialists. Therapists. The best doctors money can buy." He turned to face her. "They all say the same thing. She can speak. Physically there's nothing wrong. The silence is psychological. Trauma. And she'll speak again when she feels safe enough." "But she doesn't feel safe," Iris said quietly. "Not even with you." Something flickered across his face. Pain quickly controlled. "No, he doesn't. Until yesterday she hasn't initiated physical contact with anyone in 7 years. She won't hold my hand. Won't hug me. Barely looks at me sometimes." He paused. "But she reached for you. Twice." Celeste appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the conversation. She carried a stuffed rabbit that looked well-loved, its fur worn thin in places. Vito's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. "Hello, sweetheart." Celeste walked past her father without acknowledging him and stopped directly in front of Iris. She held out her hand, the same gesture from the restaurant. Palm up, offering. Iris took it and Celeste's fingers curled around hers with surprising strength. "I think," Vito said, and his voice was rough with something that might have been hope, "she wants to show you your room." Celeste tugged gently and Iris stood, letting herself be led from the study, through hallways that smelled like lemon polish and old money, up a curved staircase to the 2nd floor. The room Celeste showed her was twice the size of her apartment, with a 4-poster bed and windows overlooking the gardens. But what made Iris's chest tighten was the door connecting to the adjacent room, Celeste's room, visible through the gap. The girl had placed Iris right next to her. Close enough to reach. Close enough to protect. Celeste squeezed her hand once more, then released it and disappeared into her own room, leaving Iris standing in a stranger's mansion, committed to saving a child she barely knew from a silence she didn't understand, and wondering what exactly she just agreed to become part of. 3 weeks into her new life, Iris had learned that Celeste was brilliant. The girl devoured books, completed complex puzzles in minutes, and had a memory that bordered on photographic. She understood everything Iris said, responded with nods and gestures, and had started learning basic sign language with an enthusiasm that made Iris's heart ache. But she still wouldn't speak. They worked together every afternoon in Celeste's room, a space that was part bedroom, part library, filled with books and art supplies and a desk positioned to catch the best natural light. Iris had brought in whiteboards, flashcards, communication apps on a tablet. Anything that might help Celeste find a bridge between the words locked inside her and the world outside. Today they were working on writing exercises. Iris had learned that Celeste wrote constantly, in notebooks on loose paper, sometimes just tracing letters on her desk when she thought no one was watching. "Tell me about something that made you happy this week," Iris said, signing as she spoke, a habit she'd developed so Celeste could access language through multiple channels. Celeste picked up her pen and wrote in careful script. "You taught me to make hot chocolate with cinnamon. That did turn out pretty good, didn't it?" Iris smiled. "What else?" "Dad didn't have to leave for work last night. We watched a movie." Iris noticed the way Celeste's handwriting softened when she wrote about her father. The carefully maintained distance between them was eroding, slowly. Vito had started joining them for dinner. Had started reading to Celeste before bed. The girl still didn't reach for him the way she reached for Iris, but she no longer flinched when he came too close. "That sounds nice." Iris paused. "Can I ask you something? You write a lot. Do you keep journals?" Celeste's entire body went still. Her eyes flicked to Iris's face, searching for something, intent maybe or trustworthiness. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she stood and walked to her bookshelf. Behind a row of novels, Celeste pulled out 3 notebooks. Leather-bound, expensive, the kind with ribbon bookmarks and thick cream pages. She carried them back to the desk and placed them in front of Iris with a deliberate care that felt ceremonial. Then she wrote, "No one else knows about these." "Okay," Iris said softly. "Thank you for trusting me." She opened the first journal and felt her linguistics training kick in immediately. The pages were filled with entries that weren't typical journal writing. No reflections on feelings or daily events. Instead, columns of numbers, dates, names, locations. Some entries were circled. Others had question marks. Many had lines connecting them in patterns that suggested relationships Iris couldn't yet understand. Moretti Holdings, $2.3 million. Overseas security contract Cyprus. Jam meeting AV Tuesday 11 p.m. Pier 17. Shell Co. number 4. Phantom Solutions LLC registered Cayman Islands. Wire transfer $890,000. Account ending 7743 query. Whose account? Iris's pulse quickened. She flipped through pages, her trained eye catching patterns in the chaos. This wasn't random. This was documentation. Systematic, careful documentation of financial transactions that seemed deliberately obscured. "Celeste," Iris said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Where did you get this information?" The girl pointed to her ear, then made a writing motion. She'd overheard things. Conversations not meant for her. And because everyone assumed she was just a silent, traumatized child who didn't understand or couldn't communicate, they'd been careless around her. She'd been listening, documenting, trying to tell someone. Iris turned more pages. The entries grew more detailed, more urgent. Names appeared repeatedly: Julian Moretti, Alexei Volkov. References to the takeover and vote of no confidence. Financial irregularities that, even to Iris's untrained eye in business matters, looked like embezzlement. Celeste had been trying to warn her father. But without a voice, without anyone who would take her silent testimony seriously, The journals had remained hidden behind novels on a bookshelf. "This is dangerous information," Iris said carefully. "You know that, don't you?" Celeste nodded, her expression fierce. She picked up her pen and wrote with shaking hands. "Someone is stealing from Dad. Someone he trusts. I don't know who to tell. I tried to show him once, but he thought I was just drawing. He didn't understand." Iris looked at the journals, at the child who'd been carrying this terrible knowledge alone, and made a decision that would either save them all or destroy everything. "We need to tell your father," she said. "Tonight. Will you let me show him these?" Celeste stared at her for a long moment. Then she wrote one more line. "You believe me?" "Every word," Iris said. "Or every number, I suppose." That night, after Celeste was in bed, Iris knocked on Vito's study door with 3 leather journals tucked under her arm and her heart in her throat. He looked up from his laptop, surprise flickering across his face. "Iris. It's late. Is everything all right?" "No," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I think your daughter has been trying to tell you that someone is stealing from you. And I think I know how to prove it." Vito stared at the journals spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. His expression was unreadable, but Iris noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers had gone still on the leather cover of the first notebook. "Roman," he said quietly and pressed a button on his desk phone. "My study. Now." Within 2 minutes, a man appeared in the doorway. Tall, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed Iris in a single glance. Roman Casper, she'd learned, had been with Vito for 15 years. Former military intelligence. The kind of man who noticed everything and forgot nothing. "We have a problem," Vito said, gesturing to the journals. "Iris, show him what you showed me." Iris opened the second journal to a page she'd marked. "Celeste has been documenting financial irregularities. At first I thought these were random observations, but there's a pattern." She pointed to a series of entries. "These dates correspond to wire transfers. These numbers are amounts. And these abbreviated names, I think they're shell companies." Roman leaned in, his expression sharpening. "Keep going. She's documented at least 47 transactions over 2 years, all labeled as overseas security contracts." Iris pulled out the notes she'd made. "But the companies receiving payment don't exist. I checked online. Phantom Solutions, Apex Global Security, Meridian Defense. They all have registration addresses in tax havens but no actual business presence. No websites, no employees, no contracts." Vito's voice was deadly quiet. "How much?" "Based on what Celeste documented?" Iris met his eyes. $31 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Roman swore softly in what sounded like Russian. "There's more," Iris continued, flipping to another marked page. "She's been tracking meetings. Someone with the initials JM has been meeting regularly with someone she labels AV." She paused. "At locations that seemed deliberately chosen for privacy. Pier 17. A restaurant in Brighton Beach. A parking garage in Newark." "Alexei Volkov," Roman said, and Vito's entire body went rigid. "You're certain?" "AV meeting locations in Russian neighborhoods. Timing that corresponds with when Julian said he was handling overseas expansion." Roman's voice was grim. "It's him." Iris looked between them. "Who's Julian?" "My half-brother," Vito said, and each word sounded like it cost him. "My business partner. The only person in this organization I thought I could trust completely." Roman was already pulling up files on his phone, cross-referencing dates. "The timing fits. Every major transaction Celeste documented corresponds with Julian's signature on overseas security contracts. He's been embezzling for 2 years and we never saw it because we trusted him to handle international operations." "And Volkov." Vito's hands had curled into fists. "That's a takeover play," Roman said. "Julian funnels money to offshore accounts. weakens our financial position, then coordinates with Volkov to move in. The Volkov family has wanted control of our territory for a decade. Iris's mind was racing, connecting pieces. The restaurant incident, she said suddenly. How did the media get there so fast? How did someone just happen to be filming at the exact moment Sterling grabbed Celeste? Vito and Roman exchanged a look that confirmed her suspicion. They set it up, Vito said. Julian's people. To make me look weak. Distracted. A man who can't even protect his own daughter in public, who lets his emotions compromise his judgment. His voice was bitter. They were creating a narrative. The great Vito Moretti falling apart, not fit to lead. It's textbook, Roman agreed. Undermine confidence internally while building external pressure. Julian calls for a vote of no confidence, presents himself as the stable alternative, and takes control with Volkov's backing. Iris thought about Celeste, alone with this terrible knowledge, trying desperately to communicate what she'd seen and heard. She tried to tell you, she said to Vito. That's what she wrote. She tried to show you once, but I thought she was just drawing. Just playing. Vito's voice cracked. My daughter has been watching my own brother destroy everything I built, and I was too blind to see she was screaming it at me in the only way she could. He stood abruptly, walked to the window, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to that deadly calm. When is Julian planning to make his move? Roman checked his phone. The annual board meeting is in 5 days. If he's going to call for a vote, that's when he'll do it. Then we have 5 days, Vito said, turning to face them, to turn my daughter's evidence into something that will destroy him. His eyes found Iris, and she saw something in them that was both gratitude and fury. Can you do this? Can you help me translate what Celeste documented into proof that even my board can't ignore? Iris thought about the silent girl upstairs, who'd trusted her with secrets that could get them all killed. Who'd been trying to save her father for 2 years with nothing but a pen and notebooks hidden behind novels. Yes, she said. I can do this. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of spreadsheets, timelines, and endless cups of coffee. Vito had cleared his schedule, and Iris had transformed the study into a war room. Celeste's journals lay open across every surface, cross-referenced with bank statements Roman had pulled from encrypted files. Iris worked the way she'd once worked on academic papers, obsessively, methodically, finding patterns in chaos. But this wasn't theoretical linguistics. This was a story of betrayal told through numbers, and she had to make it impossible to ignore. Here, she said on the third night, pulling up a slide on Vito's laptop. This is how we present it. Not as raw data but as a narrative. The story of the missing millions. Vito leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive. Walk me through it. Chapter 1. The Architect. She clicked to the next slide, which showed Julian's signature on 47 different contracts. We established that he had sole authority over overseas operations. Build trust, show his position. Chapter 2. The Method. Financial flows mapped like rivers, all leading to the same offshore destinations. Shell companies, fake vendors, contracts for services never rendered. We show the pattern Celeste identified. Chapter 3. The Conspiracy. Photographs Roman had obtained of Julian meeting with Alexei Volkov. Timestamps matching Celeste's documented dates. We prove he wasn't working alone. And Chapter 4? Vito asked quietly. The evidence. Iris pulled up the final slide. A side-by-side comparison of Celeste's journal entries and verified bank records. Your daughter's testimony, validated by forensic accounting. She saw everything. She documented everything. And she was trying to save you. Vito was silent for a long moment. It's perfect, he finally said. You turned a child's notebooks into a weapon. I turned a child's truth into something people will have to believe, Iris corrected. That night, Vito found her on the back terrace staring at the darkened grounds. "We need to take a drive tomorrow," he said. "Before the meeting. There's something I want to show you. Both of you." The cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the river, old stone and weathered marble stretching in neat rows. Vito led them to a grave marked with a simple headstone. Elena Moretti, beloved wife and mother. Celeste went immediately to her knees, pressing her hand to the carved letters. Vito stood back, giving his daughter space, and Iris saw the raw grief on his face. "She would have liked you," Vito said quietly, not looking at Iris. "Elena. She believed in courage. In people who did the right thing even when it cost them everything." "I'm sorry you lost her," Iris said. "Celeste lost more." He watched his daughter trace her mother's name. "She lost her voice. Her childhood. 7 years of silence because I couldn't protect them. You're protecting her now. Because you gave me the tools to see what I was missing." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "Tomorrow, you're going to stand in front of the most dangerous men in the city and expose my brother's betrayal. You understand what you're risking?" "Yes," Iris said simply. "Are you afraid?" She thought about lying, about being brave. But Vito deserved the truth. "I'm terrified. I'm so scared I can barely sleep. Every time I think about standing up there presenting evidence against a man who's stolen $31 million and allied with a crime family, I feel like I'm going to be sick." "Then why are you doing this?" Iris looked at Celeste, kneeling at her mother's grave with tears streaming silently down her face. "Because that little girl trusted me with the most important thing she had. Because she's been carrying this alone for 2 years. Because she deserves to know that when she finds her voice again, people will listen." Something shifted in Vito's expression. He stepped closer and his hand came up to cup her face with unexpected gentleness. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "You know that. I'm a terrified linguistics major who got fired from a restaurant. You're the woman who saved my daughter. Who might save my entire legacy. Who stands there shaking with fear and does it anyway." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "That's not weakness, Iris. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." Celeste appeared between them, taking both their hands. She looked up at her father, then at Iris, and squeezed. A connection. A bridge. And Vito, standing in the cemetery where his wife was buried, holding hands with his silent daughter and the woman who'd become essential to both of them, realized that somewhere in the chaos of betrayal and conspiracy, he'd fallen completely in love. Tomorrow they would go to war. But tonight they were a family. The boardroom at Moretti Enterprises occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a table that could seat 40. Today every seat was filled. Men in expensive suits, most with the hard eyes of people who'd built empires through methods that didn't bear scrutiny. Vito's board of directors, his business partners, his allies in the underworld that operated beneath the city's polished surface. And Julian, sitting 3 seats from the head of the table, looking perfectly relaxed. Iris stood at the presentation podium, her hands gripping the edges to keep them from shaking. Every eye in the room was on her, assessing, dismissing. She was a linguistics major. A former waitress. What could she possibly have to say that mattered to men like these? Vito caught her eye from his position at the head of the table and gave her the slightest nod. Celeste sat in the back of the room with Roman, her hands folded in her lap, watching with those dark, serious eyes. Iris took a breath and clicked to the first slide. "Gentlemen, today I'm going to tell you a story about $31 million that disappeared from Moretti Enterprises. And about the man who took it." For the next 20 minutes she walked them through it with the precision of a prosecutor. Julian's sole authority over overseas contracts. The shell companies that existed only on paper. The wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus and Panama. She showed them Celeste's journals, the childish handwriting documenting crimes with devastating accuracy. Then she showed them the photographs. Julian meeting with Alexei Volkov. Timestamps, locations, patterns of contact that spanned 18 months. The Volkov family has wanted control of Moretti territory for years, Iris said, her voice growing stronger with each slide. Julian Moretti has been funding his own offshore accounts while simultaneously feeding intelligence to your rivals. And the restaurant incident, she pulled up the viral video, was orchestrated by Julian's people to create a narrative of Vito as weak, distracted, unfit to lead. She clicked to the final slide. A complete financial timeline with every fraudulent transaction highlighted. The evidence is irrefutable. This isn't a disagreement about business strategy. This is embezzlement, conspiracy, and betrayal. The room erupted. Men shouting, Julian on his feet denying everything, his face flushed with rage. But Vito remained perfectly still, watching his brother unravel. Enough. Vito's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room went silent. Roman, remove him. Julian's eyes went wild. You can't do this. I'm family. You're a thief and a traitor. Vito stood and the temperature in the room dropped. And you used my daughter's trauma as a publicity stunt to make me look weak. That's unforgivable. Roman's team materialized from the shadows, and Julian was escorted from the building, still shouting threats that sounded increasingly desperate. The board members who'd been aligned with him suddenly found pressing business elsewhere. Vito turned to the remaining board. Anyone else want to challenge my leadership? The silence was answer enough. That evening, Vito took Iris and Celeste to a small private dining room in a restaurant Iris didn't recognize. Over dessert, he slid an envelope across the table to her. Open it, he said. Inside were ownership papers for Aurelia. Her name, her restaurant. Iris stared at them, unable to process the gift. You gave me back my empire, Vito said quietly. The least I can do is give you yours. Celeste, sitting between them, had been unusually animated all evening. Her hands moved restlessly, and she kept glancing between Iris and her father with an expression that looked almost like anticipation. Then she took a breath and her lips moved, forming shapes they hadn't formed in 7 years. Thank you, Iris. The words were soft, slightly hoarse from disuse but unmistakable. Spoken. Iris felt tears spill down her cheeks. Vito had gone completely still, his hand frozen halfway to his wine glass. Celeste turned to her father and her voice grew stronger. You saved us. Then she was crying and Vito was pulling both of them into his arms, and Iris felt the weight of 7 years of silence shatter like glass. They held each other in that private dining room. A Mafia kingpin, a former waitress, and the girl who'd finally found her voice, and became something that had nothing to do with debt or obligation. They became a family, built on courage, trust, and the unbreakable bond of people who'd saved each other when it mattered most. Celeste pressed her face into Iris's shoulder and whispered one more thing, so soft only Iris could hear. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd listen. And Iris, holding this brave, brilliant child who'd trusted her with everything, whispered back, always. I'll always listen. Outside, the city glittered with 1,000 lights. But in that moment the only light that mattered was the one in Celeste's eyes. Hope finally allowed to burn bright.